I am here in Urbana, Illinois with this amazing 3D printed 5-string purple electric violin, and on Zoom with three people who brought it into being. David Perry, founder of OpenFab PDX in Portland, Oregon. Ananya Yammanuru, PhD candidate in computer science and member of the Electric Orchestra at the University of Illinois. And Michael Dalton of the Champaign-Urbana Community FabLab at the University of Illinois. David, so how did you come up with this design for a solid body 3D printed electric violin?
So I designed my first 3D printed violin probably in 2011. And at the time, I'd always thought I'd make a violin someday, but with wood. So I'd have to retire and like learn to woodwork and all of that. But then when I bought my first 3D printer, I realized, here's a machine that can make this thing that's big enough to sort of turn into a violin. And so that first instrument was this guy called the FF Fiddle. FF standing for fused filament. It's the kind of 3D printing. Mm-hmm. And at the time when I published the design, it was the first 3D printed violin, electric violin, where the files had been published to the internet so that anybody could make it, could modify the design, etc. And I always wanted to update it. It's, the instrument got a lot of press. It was very popular. But honestly, I personally never enjoyed playing it. It just, the playability was poor. And then, 2018 maybe, I sat down to redesign the FF Fiddle. And the first thing I did was I don't have it with me, but I made an instrument called the Hovalin, which is a 3D printed acoustic violin made by Matt and Caitlin Hova. And the design, it's if you've seen the 3D music instruments, that is the Hova design. That's probably maybe contentious, but very similar. And what I loved about that instrument was it was very easy to assemble. It was easy to print. And the whole process was just so affordable and easy. But the acoustics themselves were, I felt, a little lacking. So after that experience, I set about to redesign the FF Fiddle and decided I was going to make it acoustic. And so that's where the modularity came into play, because I have no idea how to design a decent acoustic violin. But if I can make a part and swap it out and do that over and over and over again, surely eventually it'll be decent. So I started to do that. That's what I did for a long time. And I actually didn't make it electric for a really long time, partly because I wanted to really dial in the acoustics. Like if you have an acoustic issue on the instrument, if it's electric, it still doesn't cover up the acoustic issue that you have. You still hear that problem. So I knew I had to get it really dialed in acoustically first. And then what you've made is a solid body. So that didn't come along until a little bit later. And even that instrument too, has acoustic challenges with the resonance that happens in the body of the instrument. So yeah, I made the modular fiddle, which now I make these professional quality instruments. I call them Strata violins, STRATA. And what you have there is you could call it a modular fiddle, because Strata generally are the ones that I make. And yeah, the modular fiddle platform is open source. So y'all were able to, I think the 5-string design, you had to pay a fee to download the files to then make it yourself. And that's what I love about this platform, is that openness.
How many iterations did it take for you to get something that was functional?
Oh, well, okay. A functional violin, probably for the modular fiddle, maybe 5 iterations. Okay. Yeah, the first one didn't have a sound post. Obviously that is necessary. So I learned by failing to put one in. And then maybe it only took 3 iterations. And the neck and the peg box, I sort of already had figured out for the FF Fiddle. So it was really just iterating on the body. I'd say, yeah, 3 to 5 to get something where it's playable, but it has some nasty wolf tones, and it's not anything I'd want to show my neighborhood violin shop per se.
What was the hardest piece or portion?
I mean, really dialing in those acoustics on the body was probably the most challenging. Um, and then second to that would just be designing a tailpiece that's strong enough that will hold up over time. And that's a tough one too, because it takes, a year maybe, and then you find out, oh, this one broke. Okay, was that on a 5-string instrument? Who's playing it? So it's a slow process to improve it, but those two, the tailpiece and the body acoustics, are probably the most challenging.
Could you kind of take us on a little tour of the items on this instrument that are not 3D printed, that are actually pre-made hardware?
Yes. Yeah, so let's see. I've got a 5-string here of the acoustic electric variety. And so, yeah, anything that's very colorful is 3D printed. So the neck, the body, the chin rest, and the peg box. And then the modularity comes into place. The peg box is one part. The neck is a second part. So that's all printed as one. And then the body is a third, which is the body is entirely printed as one part. And then those are joined together. And then things that aren't printed on this, we've got our tuning pegs. These are Whitner geared pegs, which is almost exclusively what I'm using now. And then there are a couple of carbon fiber rods in the instrument. So there's one that joins the peg box and the neck, and then another, which you can't see, that is running through the body and then into the neck. And then the fine tuners here on the tailpiece are not 3D printed. Whatever's in here for electronics, there's a potentiometer and a jack. Those are not 3D printed. The strings, not 3D printed. And then depending on the pickup, I do have printed bridges that work well. I do have like printed bridges with piezo elements in them. I have those on a couple of customer instruments, but in general, I'm not shipping customer instruments on those. And so usually I'm using a Starfish bridge or LR bags or a Barbera.
So that's what I have here, a Barbera. So this is a twin hybrid bridge. So it has 2 piezo pickups per string in it.
Yeah, and they are impeccably well made. Yeah. I had the great privilege to get one that was broken, and I got to tear it into pieces, and it was fun.
Yeah. All right. So now a question for Ananya. So after some debate and experimentation, we decided on ProtoPasta Nebula Multicolor high temperature PLA filament.
So David suggested we use high temperature filament, and I think we've got plans to talk about that later, why high temperature filament is good. But also, we originally thought we wanted to go with carbon fiber high temperature because we thought that would be the strongest and most interesting looking. And we went to all of the local print shops or print facilities in our area, and everybody said we're not going to print carbon fiber because printing carbon fiber has a lot of limitations because it's a little bit dangerous to do unless you're in a very well ventilated area. And unfortunately, none of our local facilities are properly ventilated enough for us to do carbon fiber. So after that, we said, okay, we'll go with a non-carbon fiber high temperature filament, and then the professor just chose the color.
For Ananya, I'd like to ask just a quick rundown of your process for printing, assembling, and completing the instrument.
Well, I mean, while high temperature filament is well documented, and ProtoPasta does a very good job saying what sort of print settings to use and all of this extra stuff, we did not have the exact printers that they recommended. So the first thing we had to do was figure out what settings were required on the printers that we were using to make sure that we could do this correctly without the printer jamming, which was honestly a really big issue, or the filament not being hot enough to stick to itself. So if you'll show the bottom of the instrument, we started off with the end pins because that is by far the smallest piece on the instrument. It took about 10 minutes to print, which means it was really, really easy for us to print a bunch of these. And if it failed, it was really not a big deal. Actually, in my apartment, somewhere else, I've got like a big stack of these, just, all the failed ones, all the ones we tried and just didn't work. After we got that working, we took a couple iterations to get a lot of the smaller pieces. So the next priority was just anything small. So the cover on the electronics portion is just like a little thin square on the back. And then after that, the tailpiece. So we just kind of went by size, like smallest to biggest, because we didn't want to start off with the biggest piece and then have it fail and be like, oh no, what's going on, without having the experience of the smaller pieces to back it up. So the last piece that we printed was the body. We printed that over the holidays and actually ran out of filament because we had done all of this experimentation. And so we had to pause the print, buy new filament, and then put it in mid-print, just so that we could get that body printed.
Did you have any challenges during assembly? I'm always interested in people's feedback so I can improve the design.
The assembly for the most part was pretty easy. I think the biggest problem was I was really scared for a little bit, especially to put the glue in for the pegs, like stuff like that, because, you know, these are things you don't do for wood instruments. You're like, is this really something I should be doing on this instrument? The soldering part was a little difficult just because there was a portion of time I was like, I totally blew this potentiometer. Like it's not going to work once we put it in. And I was really shocked that it worked. But for the most part, the assembly was super easy. We were all very shocked by how nice it sounded.
I have to give credit to Barbera for that, or at least most of it. Those bridges are just so good.
I do think that made a really significant difference.
Yeah. But then also, too, the builder has so much to do with it. Like, if you don't adjust, because I don't design it so that the, let's say in the nut, the string grooves, I don't design it so those grooves print just the way they're supposed to. You have to go in and file it. And if the strings are too far from the fingerboard, it's really kind of miserable to play. So a lot of it came down to you, too, the maker, to do it correctly and to make it playable.
Well, I didn't know that, so I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, good job.
So, Michael, as manager of the Champaign-Urbana Community FabLab, could you tell us about your role in the printing process of this violin?
Sure. So in large part, what I see as my job here as the manager of the Fab Lab is I facilitate people coming into the lab and getting their hands on to use the equipment. So in terms of helping with 3D printing, basically I advised your group of students that came in, and then when Ananya proceeded to really get into the printing of it, I was helping advise with that. We did have a couple little troubleshooting issues, so that's where I stepped in as well. But in large part, it was all Ananya and David's awesome settings and instructions. The big thing that we do here at the Fab Lab is we make it possible for people to come in into the lab. They don't have to have any experience and get hands-on experiential learning opportunities. And we are open to the public, so not just the university. So we actually welcome community members in here as well. And I am gearing up for summer camps right now. So downstairs, my staff are diligently cleaning the lab up after a very long and messy semester.
When we printed this instrument, could you just let the printer go unsupervised?
So generally you can let the print run. Generally what I say is hang out for at least the first layer to get laid down. So if you think about what the machine is doing, it's just laying down thin layers of plastic, one on top of each other, and fusing those layers together. So really it's important that that first layer sticks and sticks really well. Otherwise, you may walk away and come back and find a nice little bird's nest rather than your finished 3D print. So generally, we don't have people, standing and watching them consistently. We can walk away and let them run. I think that's one of the values of 3D printing is you can get so much other work done in design processes or in just like things that need to be done day to day, and the printer can be working on its own. So the lion's share of work when it comes to 3D printing is actually the CAD modeling and creating the designs itself.
When we were creating this instrument, we experimented with different kinds of filament. Is it necessary to switch printers for each type of filament, or can the same printer be used with some adjustment to the settings?
So You can use all sorts of different kinds of filaments with many kinds of 3D printers. Some have different levels of success or compatibility with certain filaments. So one interesting part of the project, we actually did start with a machine. It was the Creality brand printer, Creality K1. It's a pretty nice consumer level 3D printer, but it actually was having a hard time with the settings that we put in the slicing software, the software that prepares the 3D print files. So we actually switched over to a Bamboo P1S, and this was the inaugural project for our Bamboo P1Ss in the lab. So it was a great little torture test for that, and they are a very nice printer. And I would say the settings, it just so happened that David Perry also had a Bamboo Labs machine. The beauty of that is the settings that were tuned in for his printer worked on ours. So we actually had a great level of success once we switched over to the Bamboo Labs P1S.
All right.
And that being said, it can handle a lot of different filaments. So this one in particular was a high temperature PLA. And the special thing that this filament can do is it can withstand higher temperatures. So PLA is known as a thermoplastic that is relatively low melting point. So for functional items that you might leave in a hot summer day in the car or something like that, could actually compromise the structure of a normal PLA print. But this stuff, what you can do is you can bake it after, and essentially that fuses those layers together even more and gives it greater temperature resistance. So that's why David selected the high temp PLA from, can't remember, was it ProtoPasta?
Yeah.
And there are all sorts of great filament choices to be made, and not all are great for every project. There's some that are flexible. There are some that are highly durable or crack resistant, that sort of thing. But in this particular case, high temp PLA was a really good selection. And once we had the settings, it was pretty easy to work with.
I was wondering what we would have to do to be able to 3D print a carbon fiber violin. I understand there's some toxicity issues.
There's potential for toxicity. So there is some. What's awesome about 3D printing is that it's a world of possibility, but it's also kind of the Wild West. There's a lot of people doing things before all the safety, all the kind of like human safety priority is really put in place. So carbon fiber, I'm not certain if it's toxic, but I suspect, and this goes for carbon fiber sheetwork, usually you want to work with that in a wet environment, and the potential for carbon fiber filament to snap. I'm a little hesitant to let that be used in the lab because we're publicly accessible. Mm-hmm. However, the big thing you would want to do to print it would have an enclosed environment and then have a hardened steel nozzle. So Bamboo Labs actually makes one specific for doing a kind of abrasive materials, so that carbon fiber, the little kind of microscopic bits that are embedded in the thermoplastic, those can act as an abrasive. So you need a nozzle that can handle that abrasion. The P1Ss don't come equipped with that hardened nozzle, but there is Bamboo Labs X1 Carbon. It's kind of the step up. That one comes equipped for doing carbon fiber printing. So that is, if we had that machine, I think I would be a little less hesitant to try it.
All right. So you wouldn't need a special space with more ventilation.
I would recommend it, most certainly, because a lot of those microscopic things like fiberglass, things like carbon fiber, the potential for them to snap and break, it's possible to breathe those in. So you don't know really what kind of damage it's doing or effect it's having on you until many years after.
This is a question I kind of wrestle with all the time is, what is the application for these instruments? Like, you've had this experience of making one, of playing it. Where do you see these instruments going in the future, or being useful, or how might they change? What are your thoughts?
Well, the fact that you can 3D print a solid body instrument and plug it in and just get, really great sound. And, if you add the preamp and a little EQ and a, nice acoustic, like a Fishman loud box amp, I would get in front of an orchestra and play a concerto on it without any hesitation. Part of the problem especially in classical music, is that the instruments are just so expensive. The expense is kind of forbidding for a lot of people. To me, the one application I would hope could come out of this is for public schools to be able to 3D print their instruments, because the acoustic instruments they can afford fall apart, and the varnish is 2 inches thick. They really don't sound that good, and the noise level when all the kids are practicing is enormous. If the school buys a 3D printer and prints their instruments on it, and every kid has headphones, it's something I envision as a real viable application.
We talked about this school application, both of us, several times, and I really do think it's possible. I think that if a school has access to a 3D printer, you can get students excited about engineering, you can get students excited about all of this sort of stuff, while also giving them personalized instruments that they would be willing to play at an affordable price. I mean, there's so many upsides here, given that your school can afford a printer, or your community has one. So the FabLab has been really awesome. I think in total in fees, I paid like $25, and that's because we had overestimated how much we would pay for the FabLab, just because their usage was, we bought the filament ourselves and they charged us for using the printers, and then after that, we were using their facility and they were really nice about it. So the cost of entry for these sorts of instruments is very reasonable. David, you also have a Discord server, which I'm on. I saw in there that there was somebody who was saying, like, I'm a businessman, I'm not like an instrumental person, but I travel for work like a lot. And I really like to be able to just play, even if it's in like my hotel room, because it's fun, because music is nice. And this person said, it's very easy. All I need to bring with me is my Allen wrench, and I can assemble this thing in a hotel room. You can take it off. You can disassemble, like separate the neck from the body. All you have to do is put them back in, put on the strings and the bridge, and you're done. And I think that transportability is nice for someone who's not a musician, but still wants to play music.
And yeah, I remember the person you're speaking of, where yes, they took apart the instrument, they stuck it in their suitcase, and then they traveled with it. Yeah, which is such a cool application. And it is at the point where, yeah, I think that's reasonable. Like, it's easy enough to disassemble, put it back together. I don't have too many concerns about it being assembled incorrectly, especially for someone who's made it already. Like, if you make it already, you have a sense for how tight these screws need to be. How tight, if they're too tight, they break, like you break the part. So it is necessary to be careful as you're assembling them. But yeah, for somebody who's made one, and especially if you have the ability to print a new part if it breaks, I mean, they're just, that opens so many doors, and you don't have to worry too much about something breaking, unless of course you need it for a show. But if you can always replace it, then loan the instrument out to a school, or loan it to your friend who's going to take it to Korea. If something breaks, you can fix it. That's one thing I love about the project, is that modularity and the ability to upgrade things. And no matter what happens, we can fix it.
So you also make 3D printed bridges?
Yeah, I do. They usually aren't electric, but I got a couple that are, where I take piezos and wire them. They're very tiny, and then stick them in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have a few different bridge designs, and yet they work pretty well. And that's one thing I'd like to explore more in the coming months. but I haven't spent too much time on it yet. Also, too, about schools, like I definitely agree. I think what I appreciate that you highlighted is that collaboration between somebody at the school who can make these things and music department, right? And I have seen that in several different places. I've seen that happen successfully. It's kind of like a magical combination, a little bit elusive. But when you have the people who can do it and the equipment and people who can play them, yes, that is the like great trifecta. If someone at the school can do it, then that opens a lot of doors.